Okay, I'm back with the one final lecture on this great, great novel, Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, adapted as a film a number of times, TV show, a modern version, it's Bridget Jones's Diary. There's a horror parody, Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. This is a classic work, one that sets a model and a standard for what a romantic comedy should be, what the heroine in that story should be like, what the guy she will fall for should be like, and so on. And I want to discuss the very end of the book to kind of recapitulate some of the main themes that we've discussed. One of which is Jane Austen's style and her sense of humor. That is what makes this book so great and really makes it so that there's no substitute for reading the book. The films all lose the sense of humor and become a little bit more cheesy and kind of like Lifetime Hallmark movies than this book, which has a sense of humor that it never relinquishes for these cheap and vulgar sentiments that you often find in romantic comedies, in television and film. Okay, and just the first line. I'm in the very last chapter of the book. This is chapter 61 overall. It's volume 3, chapter XIX, which means chapter 19. And just the first sentence here sets this perfect tone. You come to the end of the story. Everything's gone well. Lizzie, all the struggles, all the danger of losing her social status, due to her wit, due to some luck, due to some chance occurrences going her way, she's not only maintained her position, but she's moving up in the world. She's Mrs. Darcy. She's gonna move into Pemberley. When Jane asks her, when no one believes that she even likes him, when after that part I just was going over where they get engaged, no one even in her family, they're like, what? I thought you hated that guy. Her dad's like, I'll never let you go there. Like, you can't marry someone you hate. I don't care how rich he is. And she's just like, I don't hate him. Like, you guys don't understand. It's very funny. This whole time you're kind of laughing along. And the laughter really tempers the sentimentality and just the kind of fantasy level of all this. If it wasn't funny, it would be almost unbearably happy and would give rise to like resentment, really. So Austen really has to kind of temper it with humor, and that's one of the ways she does it is through the kind of way her family can't comprehend how she likes this guy now. And she says very fun. She says in this humorous way to Jane. Jane's like, "When did you start liking him?" She's like, "Oh, I think when I saw his house, I started to like him." So it's still full of these jokes. Lizzie, even there's one part where she's messing with him and she's like, well, why did you start to like me? Like, I can see you doing it once you started, but how did it start? And he's like, for your liveliness of mind. She's like, you mean because I was a dick to you? That's basically. And he's like, for your life. She's like, you might as well just say I was impudent and annoying, and that drove you to like me. But it really says something about his character, that he wants a woman who is an equal, who will put him in his place, correct him, check him, humble him, the way you want the partnership part of a marriage and love and so on, the equality, okay, between the sexes in the relationship. This is supposedly on offer for Lizzie now and for Darcy with the happiness they've found. Chapter 61, first sentence, great sentence. Happy for all her maternal feelings was the day on which Mrs. Bennet, remember her stupid old mom, Mrs. Bennet got rid, like the trash, got rid of her two most deserving daughters, of Jane and and Elizabeth. With what delighted pride she afterwards visited Mrs. Bingley and talked of Mrs. Darcy, may be guessed, right? She wanted her daughters to marry rich guys, and they did. They married two of the most eligible men in the land. The joke is no thanks to her, of course, despite her interventions and her awkward, like chasing after the money attitude. These two lovely young women still kind of grew up to have a sensible take on life and found husbands who can support them in a world where women of their social standing, of their class, don't work. I wish I could say, for the sake of her family, that is of Mrs. Bennet's family, that she accomplished that the accomplishment of her earnest desire and the establishment of so many of her children produced so happy an effect as to make her a sensible, amiable, well-informed woman for the rest of her life. So again, the more understated, I wish I could say this had made her sensible, amiable, but of course not. She remains sort of hysterical and senseless the rest of her life, even though these good things have happened to her family. So that humor to say she got rid of them like the trash, which she probably thought of it a little bit like, fine, like these two are sold off, I can focus on the other ones or whatever. The humor there is what makes this book, a model and not something we kind of like, oh, that's gross, that's too much, this is like some like tawdry romance novel stuff. It's not. It retains this humor, this ironic distance from the events, which in themselves could be played much more in a maudlin, sentimental way, which they often are in the movie adaptations that are universally not the equal of the humor in the book. And just one other part. So what's their life like? And Austen famously doesn't really describe very much the marriages that she, formulates in her novels. She leaves us at the altar, generally speaking. And just going back to this question on the midterm, is their love uncivil? Is it impolite? And you have some hint at the end that yes, it remains that way, although it has developed into love, and there isn't this hostility, there isn't this resentment. There remains this playful familiarity between them that astonishes other people who are not used to talking to Darcy like this, are not used to, as young women, thinking they can speak their mind. And the way this is illustrated is in the very last paragraphs of the book, when it describes how Darcy's younger sister, who's about 15, comes to live with them when they're married, and Elizabeth lives at Pemberley and is Mrs. Darcy. And it's very funny what Austen basically describes their marriage through the impression it makes on Georgiana. And that impression is first that she's astonished, but then she's like, oh, this is actually the way to go. So look at this. This is very funny. I'm at the very end of the book now, last 3 paragraphs, chapter 66, bottom of the page. Pemberley was now Georgiana's home. That's Darcy's sister. Pemberley's his house, his big, beautiful mansion that's depicted in all these movies and stuff. And the attachment of the sisters, that is of Lizzie, who's now her sister-in-law, of the sisters was exactly what Darcy had hoped to see. They were able to love each other even as well as they intended. Isn't that nice? And it's such a nice ending, but it needs some humor to cut it, or it's the ending's so nice. It's like, when something's too sweet and it's gross, like no offense if you like it, but for me, pecan pie is too sweet. I like a meringue or something. I like a little bit of sour in there, because that's my personality. It's a matter of taste. Georgiana had the highest opinion in the world of Elizabeth. Right? She looks up to her. She's older. She's a little bit more experienced. She has a high opinion of her brother. She has a high opinion. But, now this is the key. But at first, she often listened with an astonishment bordering on alarm at her lively, sportive manner of talking to her brother. Lively, sportive manner. Meaning, she sasses him, she gives him shit, she teases him, she plays sportive, she's playful, She tells him, like, that's terrible when she means it's good or whatever. They have their little familiar ways. They're in love, and they play around with each other. It's fun. Her mind received knowledge which had never before fallen in her way. By Elizabeth's instructions, she began to comprehend that a woman may take liberties with her husband, which a brother will not always allow in a sister more than 10 years younger than himself. So she sees that she can take liberties. Lizzie's free because they're equals to talk to Darcy how she likes to and how she wants to, and he loves her for that. And this informs Georgiana that you don't have to lower your head in fear at a man who's your husband. You can be his equal. And then look here, then Lady Catherine now is the last. Again, the humor. There has to be this humor, or it's too nice. The book is too happy and it's gross. It's too sweet. Lady Catherine was extremely indignant on the marriage of her nephew, and she gave way to all the genuine frankness of her character. In her reply to the, that is, she abused him. She's just an asshole in these letters she wrote. In her reply to the letter which announced its arrangement, she sent him, that is the marriage, announcing their marriage, she sent him language so very abusive, especially of Elizabeth, that for some time all intercourse was at end. But at length, you see Lizzie's the forgiving, the bigger person, obviously. But at length, by Elizabeth's persuasion, he was prevailed on to overlook the offense and seek a reconciliation. And after a little farther resistance on the part of his aunt, her resentment gave way either to her affection for him or her curiosity to see how his wife conducted herself. Like, is she up for the job of being this rich and powerful? And she is, of course. We all are, really, you guys. There's nothing to it. You just don't be intimidated by people with money, because that's all they got, really. What you got your wits. You know what life's really like. They don't. And she condescended to wait on them at Pemberley, in spite of that pollution. And again, that's like when they said got rid of the daughters at the beginning. There's this joke where they're making it sound worse than it is, but she described Lizzie as a pollution to Pemberley. In spite of that pollution which its woods had received, not merely from the presence of such a mistress, but the visits of her aunt and uncle from the city. With the Gardiners, they were always on the most intimate terms. Darcy, as well as Lizzie, really loved them, the two, the aunt and uncle who happened to bring her to Pemberley and make them reconnect. Really loved them, and they were both ever sensible of the warmest gratitude towards the persons who, by bringing her into Derbyshire, had been the means of uniting them. So that's this wonderful book, Happily Ever After. You know, it's like a fairy tale, but it's set in the conditions of the early capitalist gentry. So it's set in a real historical time period, but it's also a fairy tale. But it's one that we're able to digest it and accept it without regurgitating it for being too sweet, because of the humor that she's described as a pollution at the end, that they're gotten rid of when they have these happy marriages, that the book is teeming with all these subtle little jokes and hints and references that say that mean more than the book says, and that's really Austen's art, is to suggest all kinds of things subtly and with humor in what could be a overly sentimental storyline. So I hope you've enjoyed this book. Good luck writing your essays. Please contact me if you have questions. But the fundamental question that I want you to address is their love uncivil? Is their love lacking in civility throughout? And my answer for you, if I was writing this, would be yes. It evolves, it changes over time. But yes, there's always this playfulness, this tension. There's more to their connection. It's the chemistry between them than just politeness. Okay, excuse me. Just had a drink of a soda. Let me know if you have questions, and you'll be hearing from me. Not next week. They're going on hiatus again. The college is being a little confusing, but it's all for your benefit. We're going to make the semester easier on you by doing these changes. So not next week, but the following week, I'll be discussing the play A Doll's House by Heinrich Ibsen and the short story The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. So we're moving forward in history, the late 19th century, early 20th century, and from realism to modernism. It'll be cool. And then after that, after the spring break, assuming that's happening, just stay up to date with your emails. We'll be looking at that wonderful anthology of poetry called The Black Poets. Okay, have a great rest of your week and weekend, and stay safe out there in the crisis. Solidarity, all power to the workers. Okay, bye.